just a second. Some of the things that was reported by in the media was that the state governors were asking for a moratorium on the repayment of the 403 billion naira bailout over an 18 months. In other words, if you start from April, they're not going to pay any dime until the end of 2017.
That's right.
They're asking for a number of things from the president, including the repackaging of other debts and what have you, but I didn't see any line about how they're going to restructure costs.
That's the key issue. Now, one other important leg is this. There's what we call the revenue expenditure nexus. And that means you have to break down your revenue in terms of the profile, then you break down your expenditure in terms of the profile, and then you want to match them. Now, one important thing I saw missing in that fiscal restructuring plan is what I described now, the revenue expenditure nexus. That means the first thing to consider is how do we grow IGR, okay? And grow it also to match our recurrent expenditure. Until the state governments grow their IGR to match recurrent expenditure, this problem, what I will call it, bailout, will be a recurrent issue in the discourse.
Give us 1 minute. We'll be back with you. Dr. Biodun Adedipe, economist and partner at B. Adedipe and Associates. The conversation continues about a highly indebted state government. One suggestion has been put forward by the Ekiti State Governor. Says governors should not be allowed to borrow beyond that tenure. We'll talk about that and others after the break.
There is a place the whole world is talking about. A place where big things are happening. A place that is providing the unexpected. A place that is optimistic and vibrant.
Welcome, sir. Thank you.
A place where the old traditions live happily alongside the new.
First time in Africa, sir?
Yes, it is. But it certainly won't be my last.
A place that is achieving the impossible. Welcome to the bank that believes in empowering the people of Africa to achieve a great many things. Welcome to the bank that believes that even greater opportunities and partnerships lie ahead. Welcome to Guarantee Trust Bank. Wouldn't you rather bank with us?
You know what the social media handles are as far as Twitter is concerned, at @BBolson. That's for me whenever I sit on here. If I'm out of the studios, you can always get across. Harriet is there. I'm sitting in for her for today. And of course, you have Channels TV and you have at This Morning. Get the conversation, be part of it. Let's keep it on moving. But we have Dr. Biodun Adedipe, economist and partner at B. Adedipe and Associates still here. Let's have the final lap of the conversation. And we're just talking about the fiscal restructuring plans. It looks like a bit of one-sided. In accounting, it's a trial balance. For every debit entry, there should be a credit entry.
That's right.
You don't have a trial balance when you have only one side. So because it will not balance at the end. That's why it's called trial balance, like a T.
Yeah.
So now, do you think that the Governor Fayoshe's borrowing limit plan or option is a good one?
I don't think so, economically. And my reason is simply this. Now, it is not the tenor of the office holder that should determine the tenor of a loan that you take. It is the purpose of the loan that determines the tenor.
Is that a business theory? That's how it works in business, isn't it?
It doesn't work like that.
How does it work?
Now, simply, if you approach a bank for a loan, just to illustrate, now, there are 4 basic things a bank will consider. The first is to know why they want to borrow. That's the purpose. They want to know how much you need. They want to also know how long you need it. And then they want to know how you will pay back. We call that a repayment source. Now, those are the 4 basic components of what they call a loan request. And these 4 must be interrelated, which means the purpose must be connected to the tenor of the loan itself, not the tenor of the person coming to ask for the loan. I mean, if you talk about a business in perpetuity anyway, so if it comes to business, you can't be saying, okay, look, this has been tied, to the life of the business, because nobody can determine that as we see it. But if it's for a project, then you can say, yes, the tenor of this loan in terms of repayment should be tied to the project. In which case you say, look, this particular loan we are given is non-recourse. Non-recourse simply means we not revert to the company to repay the loan. Rather, the project itself must repay the loan. So if tenor of loans taken by state governments are tied to the projects the loans are meant for, that will make a whole lot of sense in finance. And you can make an argument for that. But to make an argument for an office holder to restrict the tenor of a loan to his own tenor, that would be a kind of aberration. It also means that you are saying that every project a government should embark on should be concluded within the tenor of the office holder. That, of course, doesn't hold in finance.
So let's go back to towards the tail end of your conversation before we went on break, where you talk about most likely the bailout will be in perpetuity, because it looks like we have getting into what you call a rollover period.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So this is a red flag. That's what I see.
Straight away, it's a red flag. In fact, that restructuring plan, I will say, needs to be re-engineered. That's the word I would use at this time. To be re-engineered, because even what was presented, the 18 months moratorium, how did we arrive at it? What's the basis for that? Are we just basing it on the fact that, well, that's a long enough period for the oil market to recover, for allocations to increase, or are we having a deliberate plan to grow IGR aggressively over that period so that we are confident that by then our internally generated revenue will be so high that it can bridge the gap? So there must be some reasons for that period to start with.
The state government says that, yes, they will be able to get IGR growing and they will do a lot of work, but it's not going to happen in one day. You agree with that?
But when you look at what we have today, the IGR for 2015 vis-a-vis 2014, that will tell you the possibilities in those various states. Now, if you look at that, you see the number of states where we had an increase between 2014 and 2015, just 11 of them. So meaning that we had some 25 that experienced a dampening. And even in the figures we have, there are 2 states that have the same figure.
And that was when oil was around 100 and something dollars
exactly.
per barrel?
Exactly. So now we have a situation on hand that is quite desperate. What I will advise is that they should look at the expenditure side and do serious engineering there. And then when they look at that, also set a target. When does each state intend to match its recurrent expenditure with its IGR? Until they put that in the mix, that plan is incomplete.
So let's talk about debt relief and sustainability as the final lap of the conversation. Right. In terms of, let's leave the capital spending side of things for state governments and focus on the recurrent, especially when you talk about overheads, outside salaries, which hasn't really increased, which the Labour wants it to go to $56,000 or $150. Now, where do you think the fats of the oil should be taken out of the state governments? Do you see it in cars? Do you see it in exotic lifestyles? Do you see it in overseas trips? Do you see it in the number of hangers-on? Let me call it that. Let's call it that.
I think that is where to start from. Political appointees. Now, there's a whole lot of multiplicity of roles and responsibilities within most of our government. You have advisors, and for the same portfolio, the same responsibility, you have a commissioner, all right? So that is where to look at first. And by the time you cut off a lot of what I would call the political jobbers, that will bring some money back into the purse. And then there are also leakages that relate to travels. A lot of leakages also relating to movements. Now, notice I said I'm separating between travels and movement. I can move within Lagos, for example, but how many vehicles do I have on my convoy? Okay, each of them goes with minimum of 2 in the vehicle, and of course, each car is fueled. And so, what is the cost of that? Not to talk about amortization of the car itself, which is a wasting asset. Okay, so now all of these issues come together, and by the time we really address those issues that I referred to earlier on, as a change of lifestyle, we are unlikely to see any serious change in the profile of expenditure. Those are the things they need to deal with. And then, moving from there, they come also to personnel. People talk about personnel expenses, okay? But they forget one fact, that it is the product of two different matrices. There are two matrices there. One matrix talks about your manning. That means how many people and at what levels. The other matrix talks about the pay package, which talks about, okay, what do you pay each level and what kind of allowances and salaries across. So it is the multiplication of those two matrices that produces your personnel expenses. So now in dealing with that, you can look at the number. It might be that really, in some instances, and that is what many of them don't want to face, you probably have more hands than you really need. In which case, when you talk about productivity, yes, you measure output vis-a-vis the input. Okay? Now you look at your personnel, how many are they? And how many of these jobs are really necessary to get the government's business done? What we call the real governance. And then the other side is the pay. Oftentimes we talk about moving pay up. Do we even realize that pay can be reduced? Are we thinking of that? Even within restructuring of pay, you can move money from one heading to another.
Without necessarily laying off.
Without necessarily laying off. And also increasing. You may not need to increase, but simply restructure by moving money around the different
In other words, perhaps in practical terms, some senior special advisors getting X, Y, Z amount.
Exactly.
And you can just trim that a little bit and put that somewhere else.
You can get some savings. That is the real restructuring.
And that wasn't in the plan that we saw.
It wasn't in the plan.
Very interesting. Dr. Dipka, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. I'm sure we can just go on and on this conversation. We will get back to this someday down the line. We thank you for your time today. It's
Thank
a
you for
public holiday.
having
We
me.
need to let you off out of the studio. Dr. Biode Adidipe, economist and partner at B Adidipe and a social